In this lesson, you are going to learn the basics of anchor points. Every layer in After Effects has an anchor point. The anchor point is an invisible point around which the layer rotates, scales, or repositions itself. To view the anchor point for a layer, just select the layer in the Layers panel. Now I can see that the anchor point is right in the center of the bounding box for this logo or this layer. I'll tap R to bring up the rotation property. I'm just going to scrub the value to rotate the layer. I'll go in the reverse direction. And now you can see that the logo is just rotating around the anchor point right at the center. With the layer still selected, I'll tap S for the scale property. I'm going to zoom out of the comp window just using the scroll wheel on my mouse. You can also use the period key to zoom in, the comma key to zoom out, and there's also a little drop down below the comp window where you can change the zoom percentage here. Now in After Effects, you move things around the composition with the selection tool. That's the arrow. And you see the arrow in the top left corner. Keyboard shortcut V is something you'll be using all the time. But if I click on the anchor point and try to move it, it moves the entire layer. So if you just want to move the position of the anchor point, for that you use what is called the Pan Behind tool. You see in parentheses there it says anchor point. The keyboard shortcut is Y. So now I can click on the anchor point and I can move just the anchor point. I'm going to move it to this bottom center position. So instead of putting it right in the center of the layer, we're down in the bottom center. I'll tap R for rotation. Now look what happens when I change the rotation. Instead of rotating from the center, it's rotating from that bottom center point. So it's using the anchor point as its reference point when rotating. I'll zoom out. I'll tap S for scale. And now when I scale up, instead of scaling proportionally right from the center, it's using that bottom reference point or the anchor point. And to get the logo back in the center, I'm going to use the Align panel. And if you don't see the Align panel, go to Window, Align, Align Layers to Composition. I'll click the center one to align it horizontally, and then this one to align it vertically. And there's a great trick if you want to center the anchor point to any layer. So no matter where the anchor point is, if you want it right in the center of a layer, press the Command key on a Mac, Control on Windows, and double click on the Pan Behind tool. So I have the Command key pressed, I'm going to double click, the anchor point jumped right to the center. I'm going to hide the visibility of this logo layer by clicking on the eyeball next to the layer name. I'm going to deselect all layers, so you can click in an empty space to deselect layers or use that great keyboard shortcut F2. So with no layer selected, I'm going to go up here to the Shape tool. If you have a layer selected when you use the Shape tool, it will create a mask and not a shape. So that's a great thing to know. If you want to create a shape using the Shape tool, make sure that you have no layers selected. And when you have the Shape tool, you will then be able to choose a fill color and a stroke color. If you don't want a stroke or a fill, just click on the name and choose this icon for none. So I'm just going to click and drag out a star. I can use the space bar as I'm dragging out so I can reposition the star wherever I want it on the composition. Notice the anchor point is at the center of the composition, okay? So I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to let go. I'll tap V for the selection tool. When I click off and then click on the layer, the anchor point is at the center of the composition. So with the shape layer selected, if I tap R to rotate, notice the star is rotating around the anchor point. So that is the purpose of the anchor point. It is the center of the transformation. I'm going to delete the shape layer. I'll create another shape. This time we'll do Polygon tool. Draw out a polygon. You can see that anchor point. Put it here. Let go. Same thing. The anchor point is in the center, not in the center of the shape. The reason it's doing so, and if you want to change it so the anchor point's always in the center of new shapes, you can go to the After Effects menu, Settings, General. So this is something I typically set at the beginning. You can check this box to center anchor point in new shape layers. Click OK. Now it's not going to change if you already added a shape, but if you add a new shape, so if I add a rounded rectangle, click, drag it out. Now when I let go of this shape layer, let go, you'll see the anchor point automatically centered because we had it set in the preferences. I live in Florida, so of course I've got an orange tree graphic. I'm going to drag it right onto my composition, let go. It's a little big, so I'm going to scale it down. Notice the anchor point is right in the center of the layer, so when I tap S for scale, and I scale down, it's using the anchor point as the center of transformation. Let's get it roughly the size that I want. I can use the Align panel to make sure it's in the center of the composition, and if I want to move it down, I'll tap V for the selection tool. I'll just move it down. If I hold the Shift key, it won't go left or right. It'll stay right in the center. Okay, so the anchor point's in the center. If I wanted to rotate this tree going back and forth, maybe kind of blowing in the wind, if I tap R to bring up rotation property, because the anchor point is in the center, it's rotating from the center, and that doesn't look very natural. So if I go to the Pan Behind tool or use Y for the keyboard shortcut, now you can see my cursor is the Pan Behind tool. If I click on the anchor point, I'm going to drag it down to the bottom center of the tree. So now if I was to rotate it or animate it on the rotation property, you see here, it's blowing like a tree would in the wind. So the anchor point has a lot of use cases, but just remember it is the center point for transformations. So when you're scaling, rotating, positioning, it is using that reference point as the point at which it's going to scale or rotate around. The last thing that I'm going to mention about anchor points, and I'm going to keep this very brief, but if you recall when we went over the transform properties, the first transform property is anchor point. Keyboard shortcut A brings up anchor point. Now, out of all of the transform properties, which you are going to use all the time, the one that you're probably not going to use very often is the anchor point transform property. But in most situations, you are going to be using position, scale, rotation, opacity. And don't get me wrong, the anchor point transform property has its time and place, so you'll definitely use it in the future. But for now, focus on using the Pan Behind tool and getting comfortable moving the anchor point to the position you need for your animations. So now that you're a master of the Pan Behind tool and the anchor point, in the next lesson, we are going to look at how to animate the major transform properties of position, scale, rotation, and opacity.